we're mamas and we throw everything into our kids. We will do anything for them. We will get up in the middle of the night. We will stay awake to make sure their blood sugar is good, but we will get up to make their lunch for school and get them on the bus. And what's sacrificed is our sleep and our sanity, and we just do it day after day after day.
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Kristin Roth. Kristin Roth is a mom of 3 living in Northern California. Since her 2 sons have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, she's become the founder and head coach of T1 Caregiver Kickstart, an online coaching program for parents of newly diagnosed type 1 diabetic children. She helps them bridge the gap from diagnosis to confident caregiver while prioritizing their own self-care. Welcome, Kristin.
I'm so excited to be here today.
So I know that you are so passionate about alleviating that intense anxiety and stress and exhaustion that you experienced as a new T1 mom. So I can't wait for you to just share your story with us today.
Yes, I can realize now and appreciate how far I've come. But I guess I'll start from the very beginning of when this all started. So
take it back to the diagnosis day.
Okay. I'm mom of 3 kiddos. And right now the oldest is almost 16, 15, and 11. And my 2 oldest are boys. And at this point in time, both of them have type 1 diabetes. But the first to be diagnosed was our middle child, Sutton. And at that time, he had just turned 10 years old. And the date was December 22nd, 2015. And that date goes down in history as his diaversary, which is the day he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And what happened was we were coming up on the Christmas holiday, and I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and was planning on going back to Wisconsin for the holidays. And Sutton, being 10 years old, wet the bed 2 nights in a row. And I just thought, well, this is very unusual because at 2 years old, when he got potty trained, I think he wore pull-ups 2 nights and decided I am a big boy, and that was it. And, wetting the bed just seemed so odd to me. So I thought, well, he's a boy. I don't know what a urinary tract infection might feel like, or a bladder infection or something like that. So I called his pediatrician that morning. At the second morning, we woke up to wet sheets, and I said, I think I need to bring him in for like a urine test or something like that. So they saw us right away that morning, and we went in, and everything in that department was clear. But then they asked for an AccuCheck, which is a brand of blood sugar meter, and they tested his blood sugar, and it was 202, which is not excessively high, but what made it too high is the fact that he was still fasting. It was early in the morning, and he's not a rise and shine and eat breakfast right away kind of kid. And so when the doctor's office said, bring him in right away, we can fit him in first thing, I just said, throw on some clothes and let's go to the doctor. And he never ate breakfast. So that was actually a blessing in disguise, because we could see that fasting blood sugar was really way too high. When he woke up, it should have been more like 80, 85, somewhere under 100. And so 202 was way outside the norm. So they said, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to UC Davis Children's Hospital. They will be waiting for you there. So we did. We went straight there, and he was admitted with a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. And, so given that was December 22nd, we were hoping to fly to Wisconsin on December 25th on the morning of Christmas Day. And typically they admit you for a diagnosis like type 1 diabetes and plan on keeping you for a week. Well, we were just diagnosed and educated by, I say, fire hose. We were just given all this information, all these sessions where we sat down with a diabetes nurse educator and were taught how to count carbs, how to calculate insulin doses, how to do blood sugar checks appropriately, how to administer emergency glucagon injections, all of this kind of thing. Just enough to keep our child alive. I always say just enough to act as a human pancreas. And the crazy thing is, if you have seen, in the media or whatever, a little vial of insulin, and you realize that when you measure out that insulin, you can be measuring out in, tenths of a unit. And now, fast forward, Sutton has an insulin pump. We measure in hundredths of a unit. That is the power of that insulin. It is the power to keep them alive, but there's also power to make big mistakes. So the pressure that started that day was just extreme. We did succeed in getting all of the education complete in like 3 days, and they got us out of the hospital in time to make that flight Christmas Day morning. I took that show on the road, flew to Wisconsin, enjoyed a few days with my family, and then came back to reality. And that was the beginning of, I don't know, just a whole different chapter in my life that I never expected to be in.
Yeah, because it was out of left field. Didn't run in the family or anything like that.
No, there's no history in either my side of the family or my husband's side of the family of type 1 diabetes. There's lots of thoughts about that. In general, it is that autoimmune conditions are what are genetic, and in each generation, it may show up as something different. I did have a grandma who had rheumatoid arthritis, and I myself have an odd autoimmune condition. That is kind of the theory, I will say, that what passes down is an autoimmune condition, and in each, person, it may show up as something slightly different.
So that's high stakes.
Yes. Big time. When you think, I used to think I'm not very medically inclined, even a really bad scraped knee on one of my kids would just send my stomach just turning over a little bit, just I'd really have to grimace to get it cleaned up and taken care of, or a really bad, I remember my son once, really, really bad bump to the head. And I just thought, I just felt that light stomach and things like that. And now I'm inserting cannulas and giving injections and analyzing blood sugar data and all types of things that I never, ever would have thought I would have been capable of doing or confident to be able to, to do.
Yeah, that's a transformation. So
complete.
Did that happen overnight?
Absolutely not. No. I would say, we are coming up on 5 years in, and it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because I do feel like, maybe not curse, but what happened was a curse. I feel like an extremely confident caregiver now, but on the way to this point, I Googled every single topic known to man. I read medical journal articles. I read book after book after book. I followed different bloggers. I joined all types of Facebook support groups, what they call support groups. And I would find myself just digging into those support groups for hours each day, scrolling social media, reading all of the stories. And when I look back now, I think it was one way that I did learn a lot of information, a lot of tips and tricks and ways of dealing with type 1 diabetes. But in the process, I was just constantly bathing my brain in fear, anxiety, paranoia, worry, all of these worst case scenarios, everyone sharing the terrible things that happened to them the night before or the day before, all these scary stories. And it just fed me this constant negativity. And that is when my anxiety started to rise and my negativity started to just feed everything that I did. And I just became a mom that, when I think back now, I'm not proud of that person that I was. It probably really got bad about 2 years in, and it probably took another 8 months before I was ready to deal with it and before I was ready to say, this is something that I'm causing and something that I need to fix, instead of thinking that my kids were the bad ones or my husband was the bad ones or everything was blamed on type 1 diabetes. I was really, I'll say, at fault. I was the one who was causing this to happen, and I was the one who could stop this from happening and get better.
Yeah. So what did it look like to feel when you were at your worst of dealing with this diagnosis? Because I'm sure that you were just trying to do your best with very good intentions of keeping your son alive. And you had another son that was also diagnosed?
Yes. Once Sutton was diagnosed, there is a clinical trial called TrialNet, and some people choose to participate and some do not. It's a simple blood draw, and they look for type 1 diabetes antibodies. And so I had it done. I came back negative. My daughter had it done. She came back negative. But our other son, Mason, his came back and it showed that he had 3 antibodies for type 1 diabetes. So at that point, he was invited to be in a subsequent clinical trial. And that clinical trial was essentially those oral glucose tolerance tests that you take during pregnancy usually. And he would do the 3-hour one every 6 months. And he did them twice. And then the third time, so 18 months later, we saw that he was starting to get impaired glucose. When he got to the end of the 3-hour test, his blood sugar numbers were still way too high. And so we did it one more time, and then they were completely out of range. And so at that point, he was dismissed from the clinical trial, and they said, Mason, you are technically also type 1 diabetic. At that point in time, he did not start insulin because he was so early on, such an early diagnosis. And the blessing in that is that he never harmed his body from having extreme high blood sugars for long periods of time and us not knowing. And he never ended up having to stay in the hospital, and he never went into what's called DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis, which is where the body becomes very acidic and there's lots of terrible side effects. He was just diagnosed in what they call the honeymoon, a very strong honeymoon, and we just were told to continue watching his numbers. So we did blood sugar checks once or twice a day, and right about a year later, we noticed we were seeing numbers that were just not acceptable and not safe for him to be at. So at that point, he started insulin. So now he's just past his first diaversary of starting insulin. And we have 2 type 1 diabetic sons. So it's a lot, but down the road, I'm happy they'll always have each other as backup. And it really is a whole family disease. Not in that everyone has it, but that everyone pitches in and everyone has to be very knowledgeable. Even our daughter, she's always first to, come running with a juice box or some carbs if someone's low, or, pitching in with whatever needs to be done, or prepping fruit boxes for her brothers or whatever, we all jump in and help.
Hey, it's Danielle. Did you know that I offer virtual parent coaching consultations? If you feel like you've tried every parenting strategy under the sun and none of them are working, and if you and your partner are not on the same page in those heated moments, and if you can't seem to get it together and stay calm like you want to, you are not alone. Who knew parenting was going to be this hard? As your parent coach, I help you figure out what's really going on, problem solve new strategies, and help you feel like you know what you're doing. Find more information at my website, parentingwholeheartedly.com. As a new client and podcast listener, enter the promo code PODCAST for $25 off your consultation. I can't wait to work with you. Well, in our role as moms, we take a lot of responsibility for protecting our kids and keeping them healthy and safe. And so we already have that weight, weighing on us at all times to have that pressure to, do everything that we can to protect our kids. So what did that look like with that added workload and weight of responsibility when it became so fragile and that huge margin of error that could happen? How did you deal with that?
I would say I was not dealing with it well. And that's what got me to my worst point, to my lowest point. I was just struggling with trying to do everything right. There was a lot of perfectionism in my life. Yeah. And I guess at my worst, I would hear myself and think that I don't even like myself. I would hear the harshness in my words and the blame that I was placing on my husband and on my kids. And I remember a time where I feel like I threatened my son. Like I said, I'm giving up. And it made, the way it came out of my mouth, it was like, I'm giving up on you. And it was because he wasn't doing everything the way I thought he should be able to. And goodness, that sounds terrible just even coming out of my mouth right now, because he was only 12 years old and he had only been doing this for 2 years. And I had not perfected everything. And type 1 diabetes does not play nice and does not always respond in the way that you expect or you hope it will. And maybe he wasn't doing some of the things that I had, told him, you do this and then you do that. And before you eat, you have to do this at a certain time. And maybe he was dropping the ball, but he was a 12-year-old boy. And for his mom to say, I'm giving up on you, I'm like, kind of like embarrassed or ashamed that I even said that. So
that's a lot to ask of a kid.
Yeah. I would say what really happened was that he was at a point of burnout. He had been doing this for 2 years and it was just a lot. It's around the clock every day. It's right before you go to bed. It's waking up in the middle of the night. At that point, I was still waking up every single night at 1:15 a.m. to check his blood sugar. He had chosen to not have technology. It's called a continuous glucose monitor, something that you can have either on your belly or your arm, and it transmits blood sugar numbers to a parent's phone, and so that I can always know what his blood sugar is. But he didn't want a device attached to him, on his body, going into his body at all times. And I just felt like that was his choice to decide. And so every night I would get up at 1:15 and check his blood sugar. And, the first thing he wakes up in the morning and wants to eat breakfast, he has to check his blood sugar. He has to get a shot of insulin. So when your child wakes up every morning and they know that to eat breakfast, they have to take a shot, to have a snack, they have to have a shot, to eat lunch, they have to have a shot. Like it's just constant shots. And then you eat lunch and maybe your lunch had maybe you had a slice of pizza and some fruit, but that slice of pizza had some fat in it. So that changed the rate of digestion. And so then you end up high later. So then you have to have another shot. And it almost feels like a punishment for having a slice of pizza and some fruit, which is for most people is a very normal kind of kid meal or something like that, or even if you have a taco salad, but there's some meat or something on there that can have some fat in it and that can change the way things are absorbed. Plus the lettuce might have fiber. It does have fiber. So then the fiber plays a role in how all of your digestion and insulin absorption works. So it's just a constant task for a parent and the child. As much as I would try to take on, there was still a lot of responsibility on him. And that's just part of trying to create and coach your own child into becoming an independent type 1 diabetic adult.
Yeah. How did that affect your relationship with him?
Say at my worst, it was really becoming something very negative. But overall, when I think back, ever since Sutton was diagnosed in the hospital, and then whenever we go to his endocrinologist appointments every 3 months, we really are a good team. And I had my darkest moments, but when it comes down to it, Sutton trusts me 100%. He lets me do any kind of, injections or inserting like different devices that he's using right now. Like he trusts me 100%, and he knows I'm his biggest cheerleader. And, we go to the endocrinologist and he gets his A1C test done, which essentially is a little report card of how your blood sugar has been managed. It's based on a blood test. Okay. And every time when we leave, we go and get like a Starbucks or something like that. He picks out his Frappuccino that he wants or whatever. And it's not because your A1C was good or your A1C was bad. It's just like, hey, we did this another 3 months. Like, let's go have a little celebration. And we always do a little silly cheers in the car. And when after we get it, and it's just something that I've always been really conscientious of celebrating, like, you're doing this. And it's not a reflection of your worth or your success, because type 1 diabetes is very difficult to manage. And I always say that we very much manage it. Some people originally would ask, oh, do you have that under control yet? And there's never ever having diabetes under control. You are always just managing it day to day, meal to meal, moment to moment at times.
Yeah. And I have no prior experience of living with or really knowing personally someone who has that diagnosis. And so the stories that you have shared with me of just what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, it just feels like a lot. And so
it is a lot.
What is like that experience of a newly diagnosed family? Like what resources do they have? Like how are they able to kind of get on a healthy trajectory of understanding it and being able to do it confidently? Like what is like the normal experience?
The normal experience is that almost all of the time you are admitted to the hospital with your child, depending on the part of the country or let's say your insurance network or the practices of your local children's hospital. It's anywhere usually between 3 days and a week. And you're just admitted. Your blood sugar is constantly monitored. And essentially what you're taught is how every time, in the hospital, when your meal comes, you're taught how to add up the carbohydrates on the plate, how to calculate your insulin dose based on the carb ratio that your endocrinologist has assigned to your child, and then how to properly draw up the insulin into the syringe and inject it, and then also how to administer glucagon. And glucagon is only given, it's essentially like an EpiPen. It's only given in emergency situations if your blood sugar goes too low and your child passes out and cannot come to. Then you administer glucagon, and it's one of those situations where if you do administer it, you automatically go to the hospital and get monitored there. So it's essentially the equivalent of an EpiPen. It's something you only use in an emergency, but they focus a lot on being able to do that well and knowing the protocol of when you give it and what you do right after and how to handle all of that. And that is all you're really educated on. You are not educated on the other macronutrients, which really seems like such a basic piece, but how fat and protein play a role in blood sugar management. And you're not taught anything about traveling. I mean, I left the hospital and went to the airport. I still think that's crazy that I managed to do that, but I've learned a lot. And we've traveled quite a bit, but no one teaches you how to go to another city or another country, or how to travel well through the airport and on the airplane, handling this condition, and things that you can do to really make sure your child is safe. Because if something happens when you're away from home, just dealing with the insurance of being in a different city is likely to be just another headache that you don't need. So there's all little things that you can do. And then also like school, going back to school and how to deal with classmates and teachers and the school nurse. And then if you are type 1 diabetic, you usually have a 504 plan with your school district, and how to go into that meeting and really advocate for your child. And I'll say to get what you want, but just to put on the table what's really important, and how to let everybody in that team meeting know that you appreciate them, and how, essentially you're going to go in with a positive attitude, hoping to get everything that you ask for. But what really is important to have on there, and what things can you let slide or really aren't as important, and dealing with substitute teachers who don't know your child's situation. And then also sports. No one in the hospital taught us about sports or activities, or wanting to go to a day camp, or how to get a babysitter and make sure that you feel safe leaving your child with a babysitter. And there's just all these things. And I figured them all out on my own. And
That's so overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. And I spent just so much time, like I said, reading book after book, reading articles, Googling. And when, we know when you Google something, you can sometimes come across several different answers or several different opinions. And although that's good, as a new type 1 mom, you're like, well, I don't know. This person did it this way and it sounded great, but this person says that's absolutely wrong. And so then you're kind of like, I have lots of information, but I still feel like I might be doing it incorrectly. So it's just can be really, really overwhelming. So that's where I came to the point that people started asking me to coach them. What happened was friends of friends would know someone who got diagnosed and they would point them my way. And I had a couple of parents ask me to coach them. And so I did. And when I look back now, I see how far they've come, and I'm so proud of these parents, and I see how really nicely managed their children are, and they're a couple of years in and things are going great for them. And then I see some other families, I still dabble in those support groups, really trying to offer value and support to these newly diagnosed families. Mm-hmm. And I see parents who are 6 months, a year, sometimes more in, and they're just so frustrated and so burned out. And I think a big piece of it is we're mamas and we throw everything into our kids. We will do anything for them. We will get up in the middle of the night. We will stay awake to make sure their blood sugar is good, but we will get up to make their lunch for school and get them on the bus. And what's sacrificed is our sleep and our sanity. And we just do it day after day after day. And I felt like when I see the difference between the parents that I've worked with and all of the parents that don't have a resource, I thought someone has to be doing this. And I just spent more time on Google looking for coaches for parents or caregivers of newly diagnosed type 1 kids. And I'm still looking. I cannot find anyone doing this. There are coaches for newly diagnosed type 1 adults or people who are having trouble as adults, managing their type 1 diabetes, even like years and years in, or who are dealing with side effects of years of bad blood sugar control. But there are counselors who advertise, if your child can't accept their diagnosis, they will, deal with that. But no one is being proactive and trying to coach these newly diagnosed families and the caregivers and the boots on the ground things, all the things that can make your day-to-day easier. So often I say, if you are in New York City and you want to go to California, you can fly in an airplane or you can get there in a car and you can drive. Mm-hmm. But most people choose to fly in the airplane. Why? Because their time is valuable and they know when they get there, they're going to be in a lot happier mood and feeling a lot better. And they're going to get to spend more time in the good place. Right. And so that's kind of what I feel like I'm offering being a coach. I've seen how I got myself to the bad place and how I was not the mom I wanted to be to my kids and how I was cranky and irritated and just, I wasn't being a great partner for my husband. We were at odds all the time. And I wish I would have had someone to I say bridge that gap to take me from New York to California, hand in hand on the airplane. And that's what I try to do. I just want to bridge that gap and teach people with my years of experience in all those things that I didn't get educated about in the hospital, because that's your day to day. And that's what makes a real difference with blood sugar control and, your child's emotional well-being and your own well-being. Mm-hmm.
So in those first few years when you were trying to figure it all out, were you taking care of yourself?
Those first few years? No. I've always been, I would like to go to the gym or I'd like to go on a run, but it got to be less and less. And when I would squeeze it in, it would be more of almost as a punishment to myself. Oh, I feel like I'm, gaining a little weight. I have to punish myself with, some kind of exercise. And I just was exhausted all the time. I was not getting good sleep. I was not, putting a lot of thought into, fueling myself with healthy food. And I was not taking care of myself at all. And about 2 years ago, I really decided I'm not going to be in this space of negativity all the time. And it can be little things such as, just like a morning walk, or truly I have a small morning routine that doesn't take more than like 20, 25 minutes, but I do a little bit of morning stretching. I do a little super quick devotional that's important to me. I do like a 5 or 10 minute guided meditation with the Headspace app. And then I just, in my journal, I jot down 3 things that I'm grateful for every morning. And I jot down 3 things that I'm grateful for every night. And it's just these tiny little things that I try to do first thing in the morning. And then those 3 things I'm grateful for right before I go to bed. And when I think back, I'm like, that was so simple. But that, along with just trying to get out at least once a day, if the weather, cooperates, for a walk, and going to the gym or doing a little bit of exercise in my basement when I can, just knowing that I'm prioritizing and starting that day with something for myself makes me feel like I've put myself first, because I can't give to everybody else if I'm not filled up myself. Like I always say, you can't give from an empty cup. You can't give from a full cup. You have to be overflowing. That's where you can really easily give to others well. And so that's kind of what I'm always trying to do every morning, just fill myself up so that I have some overflow for everybody else, because then I know that I'm going to stay in a positive space and I'm going to be a more pleasant person to be around, because I've been there. I mean, I was at my worst and I didn't like that person. I didn't like that person just as a single person. I didn't like the type of mom I was being, and I didn't like the way I was being to my husband. I was not proud of it at all. And now I like myself, and I think everybody else likes me a lot more too.
So when things felt so touch and go, did it feel like you couldn't afford to take care of yourself or prioritize yourself?
I think I was stuck a lot in the realm of perfectionism. I felt like if I don't keep doing this, and if I don't do this thing like exactly at this time and every single day, like I just had set up all these parameters for myself. And I think a lot of it was based on things that I had read and things I had seen other parents doing in, Facebook support groups or whatever. And I'm like, well, I better do it all, because if I don't do it all, then I risk something falling through the cracks, or me not doing as much as I possibly can for my kids. And really, when I say it out loud now, it sounds so silly, but it was really just all of these rules that I had created for myself and was reflecting onto my kids. If my kids didn't follow all the rules, or especially my type 1 sons, if they weren't following all the rules about pre-dosing their insulin a certain amount of time before they ate dinner, then it was, there was negativity about that. Yeah. And, that's just not the real life, So I was just living very rigid, very black and white, and just like really not living, just going through the motions, checking all the boxes every day, because that's the only way I felt like I could still cope and get it all done. Yeah. But it wasn't building good relationships with my kids, and it wasn't making anybody happy, including myself.
Hey friends, Danielle here. I'm so excited to be able to offer you a way to get the help that you so desperately need, like so many of our guests have. I'm a big fan of therapy. As a mom, it's a must-have. Your mental health has a direct effect on your child's mental health. You can't give them what you don't have, and asking for help is a sign of strength. But it's intimidating. I get it, and you have to find childcare, and with COVID, who can even venture out these days? Well, have you heard of BetterHelp? They're a new sponsor of this podcast, and they are here to help. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp will assess your needs through a questionnaire and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. Their counselors are legit. Licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, or licensed professional counselors. And BetterHelp is committed to helping you find a good match, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's accessible for clients worldwide, and financial aid is available. As a special offer for Failing Motherhood listeners, you get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly. That's betterhelp.com/wholeheartedly to get the help you need today. Your kids need you whole. Okay, back to the show. And I think one of the biggest things we struggle with as moms is that illusion of control over our kids. And when they're okay, then we can be okay. And most of it is an illusion. We don't actually have control over, their behavior and their grades and their decisions and their health. And a lot of that is very hard for us to cope with and accept. And so instead, we kind of buckle down on the things that give us that feeling of control. Right. So that we feel like we're okay. And I'm sure with such an out of control diagnosis with a disease that is so hard to manage and, doesn't play nice, I'm sure that was just exacerbated for you.
Completely. It was.
So for moms that don't have kids with T1, what do you wish that they would hear from your story, and what advice do you have that you just feel like you've learned?
I think what I've learned since Sutton's diagnosis and then Mason's diagnosis, and seeing how I went in this dark spiral and had to work really hard to get out of that place, do everything you can to not get there. And really, I think it all starts with prioritizing, maybe not prioritizing, but taking time for yourself. And it does not need to be a huge commitment. It can just be something really small every morning. It can be something, if you can just manage to set your alarm 5 minutes earlier and do a 5-minute stretch on the carpet next to your bed, that's just 5 minutes of breathing, deep breathing and stretching that you've given yourself. Mm-hmm. Or a little walk. Maybe you have little ones and you can't get outside to go on a walk, but you can throw headphones on and turn on a podcast or some kind of comedy on your headphones and walk around your living room and just laugh and be lighthearted and treat yourself to 10 minutes doing something like that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. Or, like I said, a guided meditation. I've really enjoyed some just 5 or 10 minute guided meditation sessions where it's about breathing and focusing in on the positivity and the light inside yourself, and just fueling that is just priceless time to me every day. And like I said, it's not hours and hours spent. I don't spend hours at the gym. I don't go on hour-long walks. I don't, do all, I don't have a big regimented outline of what I need to do for self-care. It's just tiny things, and really trying to front load your day with them, doing something first thing in the day, because once everyone else wakes up and your day starts going, number one, you're not usually going to take time to do them. And number two, then you're kind of trying to play catch up. It's better to have that super full or overflowing cup before you start giving to everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. And it's so hard for us to take and apply and think that, yes, even I need that. Right. Or that it's going to matter if it's only 5 minutes, but it really, really does.
It really does. It's the smallest thing. And just start with one tiny thing. Just start with keeping a pad of Post-its next to your bed and writing down 3 things every morning when you wake up. When your feet hit the ground, you grab the pen and Post-its and write down 3 things you're grateful for. And then maybe on the back, before you go to bed, you write down 3 things. Throw them in your nightstand drawer, and after a month, you can go back and look through it. All those things you're grateful for and blessed with. And it's just, what a positive thing to realize how much you've been grateful for in the last month.
Yeah. Yeah, that positivity just grows and creates a snowball momentum forward.
It brushes off on everyone around you, everyone, especially in your family, that is the people that you care about the most.
Yeah. So are you struggling with anything still with, the managing of the disease, or, just your own perception of yourself as a mom as a whole? Is there anything that you feel like you're failing at, or, that you're just still struggling with?
I would say as my kids get a little bit older and they're teenagers, I want them to be independent young adults, but sometimes they choose to manage differently. And although we're still very much a team and I support them and they ask for advice, sometimes they forget, but they're teenagers. And sometimes that's really hard for me because I can see that perfectionist tendency was with me way back when I was a teenager, and which is not necessarily a good thing. But I really have to work hard on remembering that they're not trying to take bad care of themselves. They're not trying to ignore it. They really aren't. Like, my kids are very, I'll say, compliant or really trying to do a good job. They're just normal kids. And what they do much better with is me cheering them on. And when I do see like really great blood sugar, being like, whoa, like you ate not necessarily a lot of food, but there was a lot of carbs in that dinner, or there was a lot of protein with your lunch. Like, did you extend the bolus, which we call it, with extending the way his insulin pump delivers the insulin? Oh yeah, he did. I'm like, nice work. Like, really just encouraging him and giving him pats on the back. And with both boys, that goes so much further. So really programming my mind as teenagers, because I can always be like, did you take a shower this morning? Did you, why is your room
micromanage
still
all the
like,
things? Yeah.
Micromanage all the things. And although type 1 diabetes isn't something I would have wished for them at all, it's something they've been dealt and something, they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And I am lucky to be their mom and be able to be here and support them and, teach them everything I can. And I mean, we're learning together a lot of times. And so just remember that we are a team. And so I still have my moments, but I've gotten a lot better. And I can 100% say that when I focus too much on making the house, I need to have the house clean, or I need to take care of this laundry, or there's always a million things for us to do, but our kids are not always going to be there. And so it's very easy for me to focus still on all the, I'll say, external things, but really what matters the most is my heart for my kids and how my kids are doing. And I just need to always put that first. And so, like I said, I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but I still need, every once in a while, I'll see it or I'll hear something come out of my mouth and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do better the next time. And so it's something I just have to always remember. I'm a work in progress, and, I've had my challenges, but I am so grateful that I'm where I am now, because it's so much brighter and so much better than it was before.
Yeah, which is so encouraging to hear. And which leads me to the final question that I always ask every guest. How are you the mom that your kids need?
I'm the mom that my kids need because I've been the best advocate they could have ever imagined. Your kid's never going to say, I need an advocate, but there have been so many situations where I needed to not necessarily go to bat for them, but I needed to be there for them and push to make sure that they had everything they needed and they were going to be safe and well taken care of while I wasn't around. And even just that they felt empowered, because I think a lot of times in medical situations, not just children, but adults can feel very run over, steamrolled, and that here's what you have to do. And I always make sure that my kids understand what the endocrinologist is suggesting, or when there have been a handful of time, twice, where they've ended up in the hospital for different things, and nothing drastic, but just little times where we had to go there. And I made sure the kids understood, here's what we're thinking of doing. Do you agree? And just teaching them to be advocates for themselves, because having type 1 diabetes, they're always going to have situations where they're dealing with doctors, medical professionals, hopefully not too many times in the hospital, but where they need to know that they get a say, maybe not the final say, but they get a say in their care and the way their type 1 is managed. And that's something I've really been good at and been good at teaching them. And I don't think anyone else would have done that the way I do.
Yeah, they are so lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
So how can moms connect with you after this episode?
Let's see. After this episode, they can find me on Facebook at just Kristin Roth. And then on Instagram, I'm Kristin_Sonnabend_Roth. And I also have a website with more information about my coaching program, and that's kristinroth.wixsite, wixsite.com/T1D caregiver.
Okay. I will put all those links in the show notes. That way they'll be able to just click from there. Yeah. But thank you so much for your time today and for sharing what your journey has looked like from the very beginning to now, feeling so confident and ready to give back and help other moms alleviate all of that stress and uncertainty and pressure that you felt, and just being able to speak to what you wish you would have known then and what you can see from your perspective now.
Yes, of course. I hope so many parents just remember there's so many different situations that come up in our lives and our kids' lives, and just self-care is just really something that can fall away so easily. And I appreciate you adding those show notes. And if anyone, whether your child is diagnosed or everyone sometime or another hears someone whose child was diagnosed, it just means a lot to me that more people know that I am out there as a resource for those newly diagnosed caregivers.
Yes, it will pop up as a little red flag of, I know someone for that.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, you take care. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
I have so much respect for Kristin and all the moms out there sacrificing and advocating for the needs of their littles. Always remember that you are the mom your kids need. Next episode, Dr. Sue Collins shares a powerful story of what she felt was her biggest failure as a mom, and how she grew to accept it and repair her relationship with her son when he became an adult. Keep Kleenex nearby for this one. Do you feel like you're failing motherhood? Then you belong here. Click the link in the show notes to join the club and support the show. You are making it possible for this podcast to reach more moms. See you in there. Hey, before you jump off your app, leave a quick review. It helps other moms find this show. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.